begging heaven for a sign. Yet what if the tremors in your routine, the subtle cracks in what once seemed unshakable, were already a sacred reply, and you simply refuse to believe that God could speak through discomfort, through the quiet unease that unsettles your daily rhythm? When I was younger, I imagined divine messages arriving with trumpets, lightning, or dramatic proclamations, spectacular displays that left no room for doubt. Yet the older I grow, the more I realize that God often speaks in the quiet collapse of what once felt safe. Life begins to crack, not to punish or destroy you, but to get your attention, to nudge your soul awake, to create space for transformation that cannot occur when everything is easy. If lately all that is familiar seems to be shaking, pay close attention. For perhaps that strange emptiness, that subtle disorientation, is not a sign of failure, but a whisper covering its mouth, tenderly inviting you to listen. Perhaps your comfort has become too loud, too familiar, too insulating, and God must interrupt what is easy so that your soul can remember what is eternal. When your habits no longer satisfy, when your laughter feels strangely distant, when the people you once felt alive around now leave you hollow, what if that is not bad fortune? What if it is mercy wrapped in confusion? What if the disarray you sense is an act of divine kindness, a subtle rearrangement of your life designed to draw you closer? I have learned the hard way that the Lord rarely begins with a shout. Instead, He starts with small interruptions, seemingly inconvenient circumstances. He rearranges your schedule, closes doors you did not expect, jams plans you thought were perfect, and in doing so, forces you to search for meaning deeper than fleeting pleasure, deeper than convenience, deeper than what merely keeps you comfortable. You might mistake this instability as punishment, yet in truth, it is protection, a shield for your spirit, a careful nudging away from paths that would slowly starve your soul even while they seemed familiar and safe. I once tried to retrace old footsteps, returning to routines, relationships, and places that once offered certainty, only to discover those paths had been closed, not by coincidence, but by kindness. God blocked the backward route because He knew that if left to your own choice, you would remain stuck in comfort, clinging to what is familiar even as it quietly drained life from you. So He shakes, He stirs, He removes your ability to pretend that the old way still fits, and in that removal, in that disruption, He whispers, "Wake up, pay attention. Life is more than what you have been settling for." I speak to you, dear friend, not as a preacher from a pulpit, but as a traveler who has tasted this holy disruption, someone who has felt the unsettling of what was once safe and yet discovered, through it all, the gentle guidance of a loving hand. It is not the end of your story. It is the beginning. What feels like chaos may be your personal invitation to wake up, to become alert to the movement of God in ways you never imagined, to recognize that sometimes the falling apart is simply the preparation for a falling into place. The question is not whether God is speaking, but whether you will recognize his voice in the gentle breaking of everything you thought you needed, whether you will discern the sacred rhythm behind the apparent disorder, whether you will allow the unsettling of your comfort to teach you trust, patience, surrender, and ultimately joy. When everything seems to be shifting, take a moment to reflect. Do not rush to fix. Do not scramble to reassemble the pieces according to your previous plan. Instead, pause, breathe, and ask, what is this moment meant to show me? What is God teaching through this disruption? And you may notice that the subtle interruptions, the gentle tremors, are like sparks in the dark, illuminating the path you could not see when everything appeared smooth. The relationships that change, the jobs that end, the routines that falter, all are part of a divine choreography. Each movement, a deliberate step designed to open your eyes to a reality greater than your own understanding. What you perceive as confusion is often clarity waiting to be received. What feels like emptiness may be a space for God to fill. What appears to be loss may be the removal of a weight so that you can rise. Consider that the Lord rarely forces. He nudges, he whispers. He arranges circumstances that compel attention without crushing freedom. He does not demand the shouting recognition you imagined as a child. He prefers the quiet dialogue of heart and spirit, of trust built in the space where human control is removed. So, if lately you have felt unmoored, if life has seemed to tremble beneath your feet, if certainty has faded and the familiar feels like sand slipping through your fingers, do not despair. Do not mistake the shaking for failure. Consider it instead a sacred invitation to awaken, a divine gesture that encourages deeper listening, more honest prayer, greater reliance on God than on your own devices. Pay attention to the interruptions, for they may be the very messages you have longed to hear. The tremors may be the voice of God speaking through what is broken. The loss may be a gift, the emptiness, a canvas for renewal. And when you allow yourself to see it this way, when you lean into the discomfort, when you stop resisting the necessary disruption, you may discover that what you thought was falling apart is actually falling into place. The structures of your life are being reoriented to align with eternity. The habits that once comforted you are being replaced with patterns that sustain your soul. The silence that once frightened you now becomes a space for God to speak. The emptiness becomes fullness. The uncertainty becomes guidance. And the trembling transforms into a holy rhythm, one that reminds you that God is always present, always working, always caring, and that every disruption, every closed door, every interrupted plan is part of a larger story written with your good in mind. So look again at your life, not with fear, not with frustration, not with regret, but with attentive eyes and an open heart. Consider that the sacred reply you sought in signs and wonders may have been walking alongside you all along in the tremors of your routine, in the quiet collapse of what once felt safe. And as you notice, as you trust, as you respond with faith, you may find that the unsettling was mercy all along, a holy preparation, a divine nudge, a gentle awakening that leads your soul from complacency to vibrancy, from comfort to depth, from mere existence to abundant life. So if life feels like it is falling apart, look again. Perhaps it is simply falling into place. Do you ever wonder why returning to your old life feels nearly impossible? Even though you have tried everything in your power to force yourself back into comfort, perhaps the real reason is not weakness but divine warning. What if God Himself is gently blocking your way back, not to punish you, but to prevent you from slipping into a version of yourself that no longer carries your future? Sometimes He must let the doors slam so loudly that you finally stop knocking, stop pleading with circumstances, and begin looking forward instead of backwards. The truth is, many of us pray for change, yet when change actually arrives, vepanits, we cling desperately to familiar habits even when they drain and empty our souls. We pursue familiar people even when their presence now feels foreign or shallow. And though we try to laugh and pretend that nothing has shifted, the shift has already happened. It cannot be reversed. It cannot be ignored. And it is not without purpose. God loves you too much to allow you to settle for who you used to be. He removes the appetite for what once satisfied, the craving for old routines, the illusion of security in familiar patterns, and in doing so, He protects your calling. He preserves the direction of your life. He prevents you from wandering into paths that will stagnate your growth. Have you felt that restless tug lately? The subtle, persistent discomfort that nobody else understands, the quiet dissatisfaction that hums beneath your daily rhythm, a silent signal that the old path is closed because a new path is calling. It is not chaos. It is not random misfortune. It is careful, intentional, divine orchestration. And I must ask you sincerely, are you willing to let go of the past in order to step into what heaven has prepared next? Will you dare to answer instead of ignore the signs, the doors closing, the routines shifting, the relationships fading? Your life is not falling apart by accident. It is being rearranged by purpose. Even when it is uncomfortable, even when it is painful, even when the unknown looms larger than familiarity, if you feel that this story, this message, is not just a story but a mirror, showing you where you truly stand, revealing the places you cling to, what is comfortable instead of what is life-giving, then I invite you, my friend, to make a small but powerful declaration, a step of obedience that begins to align your heart with God's call. Write in the comments, "I am ready," or even simply type the number 1 to let me know you hear this call to change and that you are not running from it anymore. It matters more than you realize to see that someone is truly present, listening not just with their ears but with their heart. Your presence, your willingness to acknowledge the divine interruption, encourages those of us who pour out these words to continue speaking into the wilderness. to continue sharing truths that are sometimes difficult, sometimes heavy, because we know that someone, somewhere, is receiving them, is recognizing the movement of God in their own life. Thank you for walking this road with me. Thank you for daring to believe that what God closes behind you is never as glorious as what He is opening ahead. Thank you for resisting the temptation to retreat, to ignore the discomfort, to force yourself backward into the illusion of the past, for in surrendering to the divine redirection, you are choosing growth, maturity, alignment with eternal purpose. Every door that closes, every comfort removed, every familiar anchor lifted is a gift, a divine intervention designed to bring you into a higher, more fruitful path. And though you may not understand it now, though the fear of the unknown may feel heavy, though the empty spaces in your schedule, in your relationships, in your daily rhythm may feel uncomfortable, God is not absent. He is present, orchestrating, guiding, rearranging, and He is calling you to walk boldly forward, to trust that the future He has prepared is far greater than what you are leaving behind. The gentle disruptions, the challenges to what you thought was stable, the nudges that pull you out of your comfort zone are not arbitrary. They are invitations. They are opportunities to align your life with God's timing, God's vision, and God's heart. They are sacred interruptions and reminders that your life is not about repetition, safety, or ease. It is about transformation, purpose, and destiny. So as you consider the discomforts, the closed doors, the tremors in your routine, let them become markers, not of fear, but of divine direction. Let them remind you that you are being preserved, protected, and guided, that the past you long to return to is not your destination, that what awaits you is tailored, intentional, and life-giving. And so I ask again, are you willing to step into this unknown with trust? To recognize that the disruption is not judgment, but mercy, that the inconvenience is not abandonment, but love, that the empty spaces are not emptiness, but preparation. When you type, "I am ready," or simply 1-inch the comments, you are making a declaration, a small act of obedience that mirrors the larger surrender God is calling for in your life. You are acknowledging that you see the hand of God at work, even in what feels like chaos. You are choosing to trust the process, to accept that His plans for you are far better than your plans for yourself, and that what He opens ahead will always outweigh what He closes behind. So do not fear the tremors. Do not mourn the closing doors. Do not resist the discomfort. Embrace it. Listen closely. Watch carefully. And step forward with faith. For God's rearrangement is never a mistake. It is always a message, a guiding hand toward the destiny He has designed for you. A destiny far richer, deeper, and more aligned with eternity than anything the past could offer. Your obedience, your trust, your presence in this moment matters infinitely. It contributes to the unfolding of your story in ways you cannot yet see. And as you walk forward, you will discover that the life that once seemed distant, the purpose that once felt unreachable, is now within your grasp, prepared and made ready by the very hands that gently blocked your way back, guiding you into the fullness of what is next. So do not hesitate. Do not retreat. I do not cling to what is gone. Instead, step into the calling. Respond to the invitation. Type, "I am ready." Or simply, one, and acknowledge that you hear the voice of God rearranging your life and leading you into what is eternal and abundant. There is a stirring inside you that refuses to be silenced, a pull that does not come from ambition, distraction, or fatigue, but from somewhere deeper, darker, and holier. This weight in your spirit is not confusion, and it is not burnout. It is a sacred signal, and once you recognize it, you can never return to pretending that everything is fine. In my own walk with God, I have learned that when He wishes to speak, He does not always send visions, dramatic signs, or thunderous proclamations. He often chooses instead to awaken your hunger, to strip away the taste from shallow things, to remove the comfort from distractions so that you can discover an appetite for what cannot be bought, what cannot be manufactured, what cannot be measured by the standards of the world. When you feel drawn to pray without knowing exactly what to say, when you collapse into silence, yet hear your soul whispering, "Help me, Lord," this is not weakness. This is awakening. Psalm 42 tells us that deep calls to deep, and it means that heaven has started a conversation, a dialogue no human voice can satisfy, no distraction can mask. No fleeting pleasure can replicate. Perhaps you feel lost, caught between who you were and who you are becoming, anxious, because nothing in your surroundings explains the heaviness, yet somehow, deep within, you sense that you are standing at the doorway of something eternal, something larger than your current understanding. Something that will change the trajectory of your soul. Do not ignore that inner trembling, that subtle vibration of awareness. God is not trying to frighten you. He is trying to free you. He is dismantling your distractions layer by layer until you might finally meet Him where noise, performance, and the busyness of life have no power. When your heart beats faster at the thought of stepping deeper, when you feel a mixture of fear and longing, it is because you are being invited into a level of intimacy most men refuse to enter. Ask yourself honestly, when was the last time you were truly still before God? Instead of performing prayers, reciting words politely, following familiar routines, what if the silence you are experiencing is not because He is absent, but because He is speaking beyond the volume of your comfort? When God decides to awaken a soul, He does not negotiate. He disrupts, He shakes, He overturns, He removes that which competes for your attention until the soul itself cries back, "I am listening." That moment, my friend, changes everything. It is the hinge upon which your spiritual life pivots. It is the doorway to a new depth of faith, a new intimacy with the Creator who has waited patiently for you to notice the stirrings, to hear the subtle whisper beneath the noise of obligation, beneath the clutter of everyday life, beneath the habitual patterns that once satisfied, yet now leave you restless. It is in this awakening that you begin to understand that your hunger, your unease, your sense of incompleteness was never accidental. It was planted intentionally by a loving hand. God moves quietly yet powerfully. He rearranges circumstances, removes distraction, shutters paths that no longer serve his purpose, and in doing so, he positions your spirit to lean fully into him. He does not push you into despair, but into awareness. He does not frighten you for sport, but for transformation. The weight you feel is his presence calling you, drawing you closer, inviting you to a surrender deeper than polite obedience, deeper than rituals, deeper than routine. When your mind races with questions, when your heart aches for clarity, when your soul longs for connection, that is the voice of heaven breaking through. Do not shrink from it. Do not quiet it with rationalizations or excuses. Let yourself dwell in the tension, the sacred tension between fear and longing, between what was familiar and what is emerging, between the human desire for comfort and the divine invitation to growth. For it is here that true transformation begins, here where deep calls to deep, here where the stirring inside you becomes a dialogue, a conversation with God Himself. And as you allow the stirring to speak, as you follow its pull, rather than resist it, you will notice a shift, a subtle but undeniable change. The mundane begins to carry significance. The ordinary becomes sacred. The routines of life start to reveal hidden lessons. The moments you once overlooked begin to pulse with meaning. This is the power of awakening. The hand of God reaching into your daily life, shaking loose what is comfortable, breaking open what is stagnant, guiding your soul to a place of vulnerability where real encounter occurs. And when you finally, fully surrender into that stirring, when you say with your heart, I am listening, when your soul rises in acknowledgement of God's presence beyond sight, sound, and control, that moment becomes the turning point, the seed of intimacy, the inception of transformation that nothing else can replicate. It is the start of a life no longer measured by human expectations, but by the depth of communion with the one who created you. Every breath, every thought, every heartbeat becomes a channel through which heaven can move, and you realize, in the quiet tremor, in the sacred weight, in the longing that cannot be silenced, that God has been waiting for this recognition, this willingness to be awakened, this surrender to His whisper over the clamor of the world. So pay attention. Do not resist. Do not explain away. I do not return to the pretense that nothing is wrong, that you are fine, that everything can be managed alone. Instead, listen, lean in, respond. Allow the stirring to grow. Allow it to guide you. Allow it to awaken you fully. For once this sacred signal is recognized, You cannot go back. Once your soul cries, I am listening, your life has shifted, and everything you do afterward carries the mark of that awakening. The depth of that surrender, the presence of God who moved quietly, yet powerfully, to draw you out of shallow satisfaction and into eternal significance. This is the work of heaven in you. The deep call to deep, the stirring that changes everything. The moment your soul becomes fully alive to God's voice, the instant you can never return from the doorway to intimacy, power, and holy transformation. Listen, I respond, awaken, and let the stirring complete its work. You keep pleading with God for direction, for clarity, for some unmistakable sign. Yet what if the silence you dread, the quiet that stretches on and feels almost unbearable, is the answer you have been running from all along? I know believers who confess that the long seasons of stillness nearly broke them, that they wrestled with doubt, frustration, and fear when it seemed as though heaven had closed its doors. Yet on the other side of that quiet, after the soul had wrestled and the heart had been refined, they admitted that it was precisely in the stillness that God rebuilt their faith, that it was in the moments of apparent absence, when no words came, no visions appeared, no immediate answers were given, that His presence worked quietly and powerfully, shaping, strengthening, and establishing a foundation that would endure long after the noise of life returned. Have you ever reached a moment when your prayers echo back like hollow whispers? When you speak, and the heavens feel sealed, when the words you pour out seem to vanish into emptiness? Does it make you doubt whether your voice still matters? Whether your faith is even heard? Perhaps you feel frustrated or even abandoned. Yet Psalm 46 reminds us, be still and know that I am God. And that stillness, though uncomfortable, is not meaningless. Stillness is not natural when your world feels fragile, when uncertainty surrounds you, when every plan seems to tremble. Yet throughout Scripture, we see that great miracles were forged in quiet, that the extraordinary often comes after ordinary patience. Jesus wept before Lazarus rose from the tomb, yet He wept in private, in silence, fully human in grief, fully aware of God's timing. Joshua marched in silence around the walls of Jericho, a strategy that required faith before evidence, obedience before victory. And it reminds us that when God pulls you into silence, it is rarely comfortable, it is rarely simple, it is refinement. A sacred process of stripping away the excess so that the essential can emerge. He is not ignoring you. He is preparing you, molding your heart, focusing your attention, and calibrating your spirit for what is to come. So when the silence grows louder than your own thoughts, when your soul aches for an audible reply, remember that this is holy ground, the place where the noise of self, the chatter of ambition, the insistence of your own reasoning begins to die. And in that space, the voice of God begins to emerge, subtle, persistent, shaping, guiding, comforting. instructing. Perhaps this is exactly where God wants you to be. Away from distraction, away from applause, away from external validation, so that your heart has nowhere left to lean except on Him alone. I must ask you, honestly, are you willing to trust Him when He says nothing, when He gives no immediate proof, when He leaves you with only faith, when the world demands answers, but God asks only your patience? When circumstances tempt you to act prematurely, but God calls you to stillness, if this word pierces your heart even a little, if you sense that this silence is not punishment but purpose, that it is not abandonment but preparation, let me know that you are still listening. Leave a simple comment, "I hear," or even just the number 1, so I might know that your spirit has not given up, that you are still holding on, that your heart is still tuned to the divine conversation unfolding in quiet. Your response tells me that I am not speaking into empty shadows, that the words being shared are meeting a living heart. And for one who serves by telling these sacred stories, that small sign of your presence, that simple acknowledgement of attention, means more than you know. It encourages the continuation of truth, the perseverance of witness, the sharing of insight that might otherwise seem unnoticed. Every comment, every acknowledgement is a thread connecting hearts across space, connecting those who are listening in silence to the one who writes, to the one who prays, to the one who testifies, to the quiet power of God. Remember, the stillness you resist, the absence you fear, the quiet that stretches long and feels heavy, is often exactly the vessel that God is using to pour His presence into your life. It is the forge in which your faith is strengthened, the refining fire that makes your trust more resilient, more responsive, more alive to divine guidance. And so, do not be afraid of the silence. Do not panic at the lack of immediate sign. Do not attempt to fill the stillness with noise. Instead, lean in, listen, breathe, and allow the sacred pause to work. Allow it to draw your heart toward intimacy with the one who knows you completely, who orchestrates every moment with infinite wisdom, who shapes what you cannot yet see into what you will one day understand. The silence is not absence. It is presence, hidden and profound. It is the whisper beneath the roar of expectation, the preparation before manifestation, the training before triumph. And as you embrace it, as you acknowledge it, as you yield to it, your soul will begin to recognize the rhythm of God's voice, subtle yet unmissable, quiet yet commanding, comforting yet challenging. And you will understand that even in the hush, you are being guided, instructed, prepared, and loved, that even when nothing appears to change, everything is being arranged, every detail, every circumstance, every moment. And when you choose to trust, when you choose stillness over panic, faith over fear, patience over impatience, you step into a holy partnership with God, a collaboration with eternity, a participation in the divine process that no human effort could replicate. So, if your heart resonates, If your spirit responds even slightly, leave your mark, type "I hear," or simply one, and remind yourself and others that the silence is not empty, that your heart is alive, that your faith is engaged, that you are still standing, still listening, still present, and that in this quiet surrender, God is speaking louder than any words, stronger than any proof, and closer than you could imagine. There comes a moment in the life of every believer when the passions that once thrilled the heart begin to fade, and though nothing radical has changed on the outside, a quiet shift begins within, a subtle stirring that cannot be ignored. Suddenly, the pleasures that once filled your evenings feel strangely empty. The conversations that once drew laughter now leave only a faint echo. The music that once lifted your spirit falls flat, and the routines that once brought comfort seem muted. I have seen this happen not because the soul is dying, but because God Himself is stirring it back to life. He does not want you attached to what is lesser when He is calling you to what is greater. It is His mercy, not His rejection, that allows familiar things to lose their flavor. It is His kindness that loosens the grip of what once satisfied, so that your heart can awaken to the extraordinary. Philippians tells us that God works in us both to will and to act according to His purpose, meaning that He not only guides your footsteps, but also rewrites your desires. He reshapes what you long for, and He adjusts the aim of your heart so that your every aspiration aligns with eternity rather than with temporary pleasure. So if you find yourself waking with questions you never asked before, or longing for a depth you never used to crave, take heart. Heaven is clearing space within you, making room for something sacred, a capacity for things unseen, a hunger for what lasts. For many, this season feels lonely. The solitude can be heavy, the stillness unsettling. Yet I assure you, it is holy. God empties you not to leave you barren, but to remove what would keep you chained to the past. What would keep you bound to shallow satisfactions, the hollow echoes of routines that once felt fulfilling? There is tenderness in the way He pulls back each layer, one by one, revealing gently, lovingly, that what you thought was satisfaction was only a shadow of what He intends to give. What seemed to fill your heart now only prepares it to receive, and there is wisdom in the pause, in the quiet, in the subtle shifting of your desires and longings. Do not fear this gentle unraveling. It is not destruction, it is preparation. It is how He crafts vessels worthy of His next move, how He primes hearts to receive something beyond imagination, how He teaches patience, surrender, and receptivity, even when the familiar loses its charm, even when comfort begins to feel hollow, even when the nostalgia of what once was tugs at your soul. If right now you feel torn between longing for the past and stepping into destiny, remember that no one who has truly met the living Christ can cling forever to what no longer resembles His purpose for them. The ache you carry, the faint dissatisfaction, the restless stirring in your soul, is not a signal to return, it is an invitation to follow. It is a gentle nudge toward life that is larger than the safe, a smaller existence you have known. Do not ignore it. Do not dull it with distraction or noise. Lean into it. Listen carefully. Let the subtle unrest guide you. Allow it to draw you closer to what God intends, for His ways are higher than ours, and His plans are more glorious than any memory of pleasure or achievement could ever satisfy. Even as you let go, even as you release the anchor of familiarity, know that the emptiness is not abandonment. It is the clearing of space for fullness, the preparation for abundance, the making ready of a heart capable of deeper joy, more profound connection, and greater alignment with God's eternal purpose. The seemingly hollow moments are a canvas on which God is painting a masterpiece of transformation. And your willingness to embrace the uncertainty, to release the familiar, to let go of what once thrilled but no longer fulfills, is the very act that allows Him to work. So do not cling too tightly to yesterday. Do not mourn excessively what is being removed. Do not try to force satisfaction from what has lost its taste. Instead, watch, wait, listen, and trust that the removal is intentional, that the shifting within is divine, that the emptiness is holy. And as you walk through this season, allow your heart to be reshaped, your desires reordered, your appetite refined. Understand that the fading of past passions is not failure, it is invitation. It is a call to deeper life, to wider vision, to intimacy with God that surpasses all former pleasures. And when you begin to see this, when you recognize the tender mercy in the quiet change, you will discover a new rhythm, a new vitality, a deeper satisfaction that could not have been received while the soul clung to shadows of joy. Let this be a season of awe rather than fear, of surrender rather than resistance, of expectancy rather than nostalgia. Embrace the unfolding. Let God continue His work. Trust that He who has begun a good work in you will bring it to completion. And remember, the ache you carry, the restlessness you feel, is not to be feared or fought against. It is the hand of God calling you to something greater, a life aligned with eternity, a heart open to His fullness, a spirit prepared to receive the depth and breadth of His purpose. The old joys fade to make room for eternal ones. The familiar softens to make way for holy newness. And as you surrender, as you follow, as you release what no longer carries your future, you will find that what you thought was loss is actually preparation. What you felt as emptiness is actually fertile ground. What seemed like longing is actually awakening. So do not resist. Do not cling. Do not retreat. Step forward. Embrace the change. And let God continue to make you into a vessel capable of receiving all that He has for you. The quiet transformation is His mercy, and the invitation it carries is the path into the life He has designed for you. What if your breaking is actually your breakthrough? I ask because I have witnessed it firsthand. Men and women convinced their lives were falling apart, crying out, "Why has God abandoned me?" Only to discover later that He was never closer than in the season of shaking when relationships shifted, routines crumbled, and answers seemed painfully delayed. They thought they were losing everything, when in fact, heaven was carving away only what could not travel with them into their calling. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those crushed in spirit. This scripture lives not on paper, but in every soul refined through holy fire. Perhaps you feel your strength draining even as you continue standing. Your prayers feel dry, your heart weary, yet somehow you are still here, still breathing. That is not determination alone. It is the sustaining hand of God. When He begins to break off what once held you, it is not destruction. It is design. He refuses to let the trivial comforts of yesterday burden the destiny being born within you. You are not being crushed. You are being carved, stripped of the pride, distraction, and hidden weights you carried unknowingly. I have learned that true transformation rarely comes gently. It often arrives disguised as discomfort. Sometimes God must allow the walls to tremble so you do not cling to what is no longer meant for you. You may feel like you are falling apart, but you are in truth falling into place. Every delay is a lesson, every tear a preparation. On the other side of this shaking stands the version of you God always intended, not weaker, wiser, not wounded, whole. I speak this not as distant poetry, but as a testimony forged in pain and transformed by grace. Maybe all those quiet shifts, setbacks, and sleepless nights were never random. Maybe they were God speaking all along, not with words, but with movements of your soul, asking, "Will you answer? Or will you turn away from the voice that calls you even now?" What comes next is not for the faint of heart. It is for those who refuse to die in comfort and choose instead to rise in purpose. Are you ready to discover why God allowed every storm to reach you in the first place? Every moment of unease, every tremor in your plans, every heartache and unanswered question was not abandonment, but preparation. Heaven was working behind the scenes, removing what would weigh you down, teaching you to trust in His timing, to walk by faith rather than by sight, to depend on His strength rather than your own. Perhaps it feels as though everything you loved is slipping, yet the truth is, He is pruning, refining, shaping, so that the life you will step into is purer, stronger, and more aligned with His purpose than anything you could have imagined. Do not fear the shaking. Do not resist the pressure. Do not attempt to patch or preserve what God is intentionally letting go. He is not taking away to punish. He is taking away to protect. Every closed door is a safeguard. Every sudden disruption, a nudge toward destiny. every silent answer a summons to trust. Maybe you are tired of waiting, exhausted from holding on, confused by the pain, yet in the midst of that, God's presence remains even when unseen, even when unheard. It is His invisible hand that upholds you, His quiet voice that whispers in the chaos, reminding you that the fall you feel is actually a rise you cannot yet perceive. Transformation requires the breaking of old patterns, the surrender of old comforts, the letting go of the familiar in order to make room for the new. The version of you God intends cannot coexist with what is holding you back. Every tearing, every shift, every tremor is a carving, a divine sculpting, and it is sacred even when it feels harsh, even when it feels unfair, even when it seems to stretch beyond endurance. Trust that what is being removed cannot accompany you into the calling that is waiting. The trials, the storms, the sleepless nights are the chisel and hammer in the hands of the Master, forming, shaping, refining, each one necessary for the full emergence of who you are meant to become. The breakthrough is already underway. Even if you cannot see it, even if your heart trembles, even if you feel weak, what seems like a fracture is actually the making of strength. What seems like loss is the preparation for gain. What seems like abandonment is actually the embrace of a future you could not reach while clinging to the past. So do not resist the shaking. Do not fight the breaking. Do not despair at the dismantling of old structures. Embrace it. Trust it. Receive it. Let the divine process move fully through you, and in this, you will discover not only resilience, but revelation. Not only endurance, but awakening. Not only survival, but the birth of a life marked by purpose, meaning an alignment with heaven. This is the reason why storms were allowed, why nights felt endless, why questions remained unanswered for so long. It was all to prepare the vessel, to awaken the heart, to refine the soul, to carve away what would hinder the full expression of God's plan in your life. The Lord never wastes a season, never misdirects, never abandons. Even when it feels like the breaking is too much, even when the pressure seems unbearable, even when the silence is deafening, He is at work and the breakthrough is certain. So ask yourself, are you ready to receive it? Are you willing to let go of what must fall away? Are you prepared to step forward into the life waiting beyond the shake? When you answer yes in faith, the transformation completes, the breakthrough manifests, the purpose is revealed, and you will stand on the other side not only intact, but elevated, refined, and fully aligned with the calling God always intended. So embrace the shaking, trust the process, hold fast to faith, and watch as the breaking becomes your breakthrough, as the pruning produces fruit, as the surrender births strength, and as every storm you endured reveals the purpose God wove through it. For in the end, the breaking was never the end. It was always the beginning of the life you were meant to walk, the path of destiny, the unfolding of grace, and the full manifestation of God's perfect plan in and through you.